The influence of the Bible and religion in the American Revolution is demonstrated through the overarching concept of biblical and religious themes in founding documents during that time period by many of the civic-minded leaders as well as the general public. Approximately 44% of citations in the 1770s were actually from the Bible, and most of the political leaders during that time were considered Christians. Although it has been argued that some were influenced by deism, the overarching Christian themes in primary source documents from that time would suggest that most of them were, in fact, Christians. The far-reaching impact of the Bible during that time, as well as religion, demonstrates that these themes gave colonists a more deeper, personally relevant cause for fighting in the Revolution, rather than just through the mere economic injustices done to them and their lack of representation in Parliament. The Bible provided a unifying text for the colonists at that time period. They had been taught since early childhood using the New England Primer, which was almost like a textbook for children at that time period. The New England Primer actually used illustrations, allusions to biblical themes and biblical stories, as well as hymns to teach children. And so this would have provided the colonists with a common background and a common language on which to base their revolutionary cause when used in the appropriate manner. So Daniel Dreisbach notes in his work that following an extensive survey of American political literature from 1760 to 1805, that Donald S. Luntz, a political scientist, reported that the Bible was cited more frequently than any European writer or even any European school of thought, such as the Enlightenment or Whig traditions. The Bible provided a relevant source upon which to draw from for analogies and dialogue that would have been common knowledge for most of the colonists during that time period, and it allowed revolutionaries to spread their message in a understandable fashion to the common public. Revolutionary ideas were prevalent not only among the elite upper class, but also among the less commonly heard voices at that time, such as women and clergy. One woman who was specifically noted for writing during that time period about religion and politics was Mercy Otis Warren, and I'm going to quote from her book. She wrote, "Perhaps few will deny that religion, viewed merely in a political light, is, after all, the best cement of society, the great barrier of just government, and the only certain restraint of the passions, those dangerous inlets to licentious anarchy." She was demonstrating that religion gave a way for government to operate that gave justice to everyone, or more equally to everyone, and it kept dangerous passions from influencing government into one way or another. Founding fathers needed support for their cause, and so they turned to the American Puritan heritage as suggested by Thomas Jefferson, and actually called upon the clergy. Virginia's House of Burgesses actually called for the preachers to take up the revolutionary cause in their pulpits. And so Presbyterian minister of South Carolina, William Tennant, and I quote, "boldly stepped forward, the champion of liberty and independence, with zeal and eloquence preached resistance, nor failed to support it with all his energies," as noted by Deward Stokes in his article, "The Presbyterian Clergy in South Carolina and the American Revolution." Two other notable clergy that I wanted to bring to attention were Jonathan Mayhew, who exalted resistance to tyranny as a Christian duty in many of his sermons, and Reverend Peter Muhlenberg, who's noted for, after one of his sermons, removing his clerical robes to reveal that he was wearing his Virginia militia uniform. The Great Awakening, a religious movement in the 1740s, also brought sweeping changes to the colonies that continued into the Revolution. In his review, The American Revolution as a Religious Revival, The Millennium in One Country, William McLaughlin refers to Allen Heimert's, quote, "What the colonies had awakened to in the 1740s was none other than independence and rebellion." He demonstrates that the influence of the Great Awakening transcended right into the American Revolution. Also in A Cautious Enthusiasm, Mystical Piety, and Evangelicalism in South Carolina, Samuel Smith as well demonstrates that the Great Awakening actually provided a unifying background upon which the colonists became more unified right into the Revolution. And I quote, "Evangelicalism's transcendent and flexible qualities contributed to the formation of political and social consensus in the South and supplied impulse for a unified action into the Revolutionary era." So he was demonstrating that in his book, the evangelicalism movement that came along in the Great Awakening actually unified the colonists, and that unification kept them unified right up into and through the Revolution and gave them a unification, a way to work together during the Revolution. Not all clergy were actually as outspoken, though. Dr. Samuel Cooper, he was Reverend of the Brattle Street Church in the years leading up to the American Revolution, and in 1765 he is noted for, and I quote, "preaching without disturbing political or religious doctrines in his sermons." And so his sermons were frequently visited by loyalists and those from the Whig Party, such as John Hancock, James Bowdoin, Dr. Joseph Warren, and from time to time even John Adams came to his sermons. In England, the religious temperaments of the colonies were also noted. In his sermon, The Bible and the Sword, John Fletcher urged his fellow Englishmen to turn back to religion. He said, "There is more solidity in this argument than in all that Dr. Price has advanced. If the colonists throng the houses of God, while we throng playing houses, or houses of ill fame, if they crowd their communion tables, and we crowd the gaming tables or festival boards, if they pray while we curse, if they fast while we get drunk, if they keep the Sabbath while we pollute it, if they shelter under the protection of heaven while our chief attention is turned to our troops, we are in danger, in great danger. Our cause be ever so good, and our force ever so formidable, our case is bad, and our success is doubtful." So Fletcher was pleading his fellow Englishmen to return to the Bible and return to religion and return to God, or else they were going to lose the war, and in the end they did lose the war. Other reasons for believing that the Bible and religion were important in the Revolution was the fact that many primary source documents did refer to the Christian or biblical themes. The New England Primer, as mentioned before, as well as Thomas Paine's Common Sense and the Declarations and Causes of Necessity for Taking Up Arms as proclaimed by Congress, were all documents that had biblical or religious themes. Thomas Paine's Common Sense had numerous religious allusions, such as, "But there is another greater distinction for which no truly natural or religious reason can be assigned, and that is the distinction of men into kings and subjects," saying that the Bible or religion gives no cause for the distinction of there being a king and a subject. While as Congress, in the Declaration of Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms, pleaded their case that it was because of divine providence only was the revolution able to become into effect, because the colonies had grown up and were able to defend themselves. In conclusion, we can't examine the Revolution without looking to the Bible and religion, because that gave the colonists a unifying background to draw upon, as well as a source for inspiration and validity for their fight against injustice. So the Bible and religion has a direct correlation with the American Revolution.